going on, y'all? It's Ray Worldwide. Did y'all know that at a certain point in time, the black culture in America was on a trajectory of being one of the wealthiest and most successful cultures in America, if not the wealthiest and most successful culture in America? Did y'all know that? After the abolishment of slavery, a few years down the road, when the black people finally felt that they had their freedom and they felt that they could do, what they wanted, we started to take over everything. We took over the music industry. We started to take over the art industry. We started to take over the sports industry. We started to take over, we created our own Wall Street. We had, I know you guys have heard of Black Wall Street. And we were on a trajectory of being one of the wealthiest and most successful cultures in America. Yeah, that's super interesting when you think about it. And when you say that, people would ask, well, what happened? Well, why didn't we? And my take and my opinion on that is that when the government and the powerful culture at the time, the white people, when they started to realize that, they were like, oh hell no, we can't have that. We just had y'all as slaves, and now y'all think that y'all about to outdo us, outwork us, and everything that we've done. And so of course they stick their nose in our business, and they do what they can to, and they did what they could to rip us apart. And unfortunately it worked. They went down into Black Wall Street, they burned it down and killed a bunch of people, put an end to that. They went into the sports industry and the music industry, and they took complete control of that. Hey, you can be the athlete, but we take over the corporate side. We're taking over the business side of things. So yeah, you can be an athlete, but we ain't gonna pay you shit. This, that, and things of that nature. And I found it very interesting. And then the next question I had after that, after they went and did all of that to our culture, and basically tried to re-oppress us, why didn't we stand back up and start rebuilding again? Why didn't we just say, to hell with what y'all talking about, y'all can do what y'all want to do, but we're still gonna do what we gonna do? Why didn't that ever happen? And only people that could truly answer those kinds of questions are the ones that were there, the ones that were involved. Because, when you look at it now, in hindsight, the things that they tried worked, and the black culture never stood back up and puffed our chests out again and said, hey, we don't give a damn about what y'all talking about. We don't care about what y'all do. We never got back around to that point. And instead, we kind of, put our heads to the ground and kind of turn the other cheek and act like we didn't see what was going on. Meanwhile, they were still calculating on how they were going to keep us down. And hence, the whole after the whole women empowerment thing happened, then they started to convince our black mothers, and the black family as a whole, they started to convince the black woman to kick the husband out of the house and get him away from the family in order for them to give her money to take care of her family alone. It's called incentives. They say, hey, we'll give you this incentive if you kick your husband out. The incentive was, you kick him out, we will give you money to pay your rent, we will give you money to pay your bills, we will give you money to buy your food, things of that nature. And when you think about it, it's kind of sweet and sour a little bit, because you can understand why some of them did it, because most black people were still living in poverty. They didn't have a lot already. And when the government comes and says, hey, we'll give you what you need as long as you kick the husband out, the mother is thinking in the interest of not only herself, but her kids as well. And she's thinking, well, my husband is working, but he's not bringing in a lot of money. The government's going to give us a lot more. So if I put him out, my family will be taken care of, which is exactly what they want. And when that started to happen, and when they started to realize that the women were buying into it, and then they put it under, strong and independent woman. When they realized that they were starting to buy into it, they started to push it even more. Then it got to, we're not giving you anything if he's in the house. If you have any kind of man in the house, we're not going to give you anything. And so that makes the woman feel strong and independent. And of course, she's not just going to say to her husband, hey, I'm going to divorce you so that the government will take care of us. She probably will come up with some sort of an argument, you broke, you don't, I'm not going to make a lot of assumptions here, but I'm assuming that's probably how it went. They would start some sort of an argument and then use whatever they were arguing about as an excuse to divorce and leave the man and take her kids, and that would make her feel strong and independent, because she don't have a man, and now she don't need a man because the government is taking care of her. Then they allow the women to go out and get jobs, and she's working and she's making money, but she's making money and then the government is still giving her money, so she's making almost double. And so now she's strong and independent. She don't need no man now. And so she doesn't let him back in, and that spreads, and it happened to so many of our black families. And that basically ruined the next generation to follow, because all that's going on when those kids grow up, the mother's gonna teach the mother would teach those same ideas, if not similar ideas, to those kids that are growing up. Teach the daughter, you don't need to depend on no man, don't ever depend on no man, you can do bad all by yourself. And the girl grows up, and of course she's gonna believe what her mother is saying, because that's her role model right there. And she's like, okay, well, I'm gonna do what my mom did, find me a good, successful job, and not have to depend on no man. And then it's worse for the boys, because they grow up and they don't have that father figure anymore. They don't have a father figure anymore. They grow up being raised by their mother and their sister, or whoever else, and they're raised without that strong male figure to teach them how to be a man. And something that a lot of women get confused, in my opinion, is, well, when it comes to being a single mother raising boys, is they think that they can raise a man and show him how to be a man, which I disagree with that. Now, I agree that a woman, she can raise a man, yes, but she can't teach a man how to be a man, because that's something that only a man can do. Only a man can teach a boy how to be a man. A woman can't teach a man how to be a man, because she's not a man. And she doesn't understand the struggles that a man goes through, especially as a black man. She doesn't understand the challenges. She doesn't understand the challenges that come along with being a young black man. You know, and she raises the boy to be very emotional. You know, you need to be in touch with your emotions. And she doesn't when she raises a boy, she tries to raise him into a man. She tries to raise and create him into a man that she wants in her life, that she would be looking for in a man. She doesn't raise him to just be a man. You know, stoic, dominant, you know, things of that nature. She doesn't raise him to be that. So when that boy grows up and she's taught him how to be in touch with his emotions, and you're allowed to feel and act off emotion, then you get bigger problems. You know, not only do you have a weak man, but you have a man who acts on his emotions. And when men get emotional, any emotion that we're feeling can inevitably just turn into anger. And when men get angry, we get violent. And when we get violent, that's when big problems start to arise. That's when you start to have school shootings. That's when you start to have murders, and you start to have, you know, I don't want to say the word, but well, fuck it, I'm just saying, you know, you start having rape and, you know, things of that nature, because you have a man that acts off of emotion. And that's not good for society. On top of that, he's already a weak man. You know, he's learned how to obey a woman and in a way submit to a woman, which is ass backwards, because that's not how a family is supposed to be, let alone a couple. The man is not supposed to be the one that submits to his woman and does her bidding. That's not how it goes. Not in my opinion. That's not how it's supposed to go. So all that to say, when the man was not in the house, it's very detrimental to the boys, especially, and for the daughter as well, because when she's growing up, her mom's teaching her all these things about how to be a strong and independent woman, but she's not teaching that girl how to find a husband. She's not teaching her how to deal with a man properly. You know, she's not teaching her, you know, the important things when it comes to having a husband or a boyfriend. She's not teaching her that, because the mother doesn't have one herself, and the ones that she did have, they didn't work out. Usually probably because she left them for whatever reason. And so without that strong father figure there to raise that daughter, she's only being taught what the mother is telling her. And she doesn't know how to act when a man comes around her. You know, she's not raised to know what to expect from a man. You know, open the door. Be, in simple terms, be the rock that her waves crash, that her emotional waves crash upon. Things of that nature. You know, she's not being taught that. She's being taught strong and independent. You don't need no man. Don't let no man do this. Don't let no man do that. If he does this, leave him. If he does that, leave him. And then when she grows up and she's actually older and she finds that boyfriend and she starts to go through troubles with him, or her relationship starts to have a problem, and she decides to come to her mother about it, or any of the other strong, independent women in her family, she comes to them to explain her problems, the first thing they'll say is leave him. If he ain't doing this and that, leave him. Which is bad, because then she leaves and then she goes and gets with another one. And then, you know, and the cycle continues. And when she's being taught how to, in ways, you know, sort of take advantage of a man and how to get what she wants from a man, you know, sucks to say it, but a lot of the girls, they turn into hoes and whores. They go out and they mess around, you know, with all these guys, because they don't have a father figure in their life to tell them, you know, that this is how you can find you a husband. This is what you look for. You know, men don't like hoes. You know, things of that nature. He's not there to teach her that. So she's just out She just out doing
In 1
trial by
3/4
fire,
miles,
trying
take
to
exit
figure it out as she
46BA
goes.
on the right to
Which is
North
no
Carolina
good.
87 South, then keep left.
But, yeah, it's crazy how our black culture went from being almost the most successful to now being damn near back at the bottom of the barrel. And the system is, they're doing what they can to keep us there. And in a lot of cases they're winning on a lot of people, but they don't realize what's going on. You know, they keep you distracted and they keep you oppressed. You know, they've got all the girls and women in our generation thinking that it's okay to go out and be at home. You know, and they got the guys believing, you know, it's okay to be emotional. It's okay to be caught up in your feelings. You know, your feelings matter. Things of that nature, you know, and they sweeten the pot for it. You know, they cover in the poison in honey.
Take exit
People sit there
46BA on the right to North Carolina 87 South, then
It's
keep
crazy.
left.
I feel like our generation has it worse, especially when social media was created and the phone was created. It's all a big distraction. They know what they're doing. Don't think that these people are dumb, because they know what they're doing. They know exactly what they're doing.
Keep left to North Carolina 87 South, then keep right.
What they're doing. They've created these phones to keep you distracted and keep you addicted to the distractions. You know, you go on your phone and you scroll and it'll show you something that makes you happy or something that makes you sad, and it sits there and it plays with your emotions all day, all night, as long as you're sitting there, you know, scrolling and distracted. You know, you can't look away because you're just so entertained. You're just so entertained. So you sit there just scrolling, and just laughing. Next video, now you're mad about something. Then you scroll to the next video. Now you're laughing, and now you're sad and happy and sad, and you're going through all these emotions. And by the time you look up from your phone, it's been 5 hours, and your emotions are completely drained. You know, you're now emotionally drained for that entire day, that you don't even want to do anything else. You just feel lazy now. You know, because you don't have that dopamine spike, and now it's worn off. You don't have any energy to do anything anymore. And that's exactly what they want. They don't want you having energy to go out and do something with yourself.
Continue on North Carolina 87.
They want you to be a good slave. They want you to go to work, get up in the morning, go to work, get off work, go home, eat, fatten yourself up, watch TV, play the video game all day, scroll on your phone all the way to the time that you go to sleep. That's what they want. And most people do it, because slavery doesn't have a race anymore. It's for everybody. And the masters is the system, the ones pulling the strings, the government, and the so-called 1% is the title that they like to give those guys. Those guys try to keep you at the bottom, and of course they do, because the people at the bottom are the ones keeping the system running. So why wouldn't you want to do what you can to keep them there, to keep them depending on you, keep them working for you, and keep all that money flowing into your pockets? You know, and as long as the people are distracted, they're not even going to realize. People are so distracted. People are so distracted that the government does what they want. They do what they can to keep you in the position that you're in, while they go out and do what they want to do to pad their pockets. And nobody says anything, nobody does anything, because they're so distracted. We're too distracted. We're too tired. You know, I'm too worried about how I'm going to pay my rent next month. Things like that. For people to really care much about what the system and the elites have going on. You know, they'll start a war and they'll kill 100,000 people, and people be like, "Damn, that's crazy," and you just get right back on the phone, scroll again. They'll even read it while they're scrolling. They'll say, "Hey, your government just went out and committed a genocide." And they'll say, damn, that's crazy. I can't believe that. That's ridiculous. Somebody should do something about that. And they just go right back, scroll, mindless, and then they wake up and go to work the next morning and just continue that cycle the rest of their lives until they retire. You know that our average retirement age for our generation is now 70 plus. It used to be like 60, between 60 and 65 or something like that. And back then it was probably younger, but now people of our generation, they don't expect us to be able to retire until we're 70. How many people are going to actually make it to 70? When you think about that, like, that's just crazy. But nobody says anything and nobody's going to do anything because we're too distracted. People are too worried about where their next meal is going to come from, or how they're going to come up with the rent, or how they're going to come up with the car note. So they too worried about what Beyonce got going on in her life. They too worried about, all this other, what's the word I can use for it? These other outside things. They're all worried about all these other outside things that have nothing to do with them. That has nothing to do with what they got going on. Nothing to do with their life. But they're so worried about that they're not even paying attention to what they got going on in their life personally. And it's ridiculous. And they got everybody too weak to be able to stand up against them. Too weak and distracted to stand up and fight the system again. So it's just crazy because our past generations, our ancestors, they worked so hard and they fought so hard to get our culture to the point that it's at today. And yet most of us aren't even doing anything with it. We're just taking it all for granted. Not even paying any attention to the hard work and dedication that our ancestors, and the pain and suffering, not to mention the pain and suffering that our ancestors had to go through just to allow us the freedom to go anywhere we want, to work any job we want, to have equal pay, to have equality, to go to the same schools as a white kid. All that stuff that our ancestors bust their tails for, we just take it for granted. We don't pay no attention to it because we're too distracted. We're too distracted with the phone, social media. We're too distracted with the TV. And a lot of us as a people are right where the elites want us to be. And that's just that. My only question is, when are we going to wake up? When are we going to wake up and when are we going to stand up against these systems that are in place to keep us where we are? What is it going to take for us to get to that point? That's my question. Y'all let me know down in the comments. Ray Worldwide out.